Well, good evening. Good evening. And thank you so much. I'm going to give people some time to tune into CMP Radio. Please tag a friend and tell a friend that we are talking about IDEA, individualized education plans, right? And what we can do to ensure the school district as well as families, our children can receive a free and appropriate public education. So please tag a friend and tell a friend that we are definitely live. So we are literally picking up on a live that we did last week, right? In terms of IEPs, individualized education plans. And last week we went over the checklist. And just to reiterate and recap, on the checklist, it talks about is, English your primary or secondary language. Because in terms of IEPs, parents have a right for their children's IEPs to be in their native languages. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then we also talked about if your children have any communication needs. And with communication needs, let's just, talk about the fact that it does not just have to be your child's ability to articulate, right? To say things, but it's also, and that's the receptive language. I mean, the expressive language, excuse me. The expressive language, your child's ability to be able to express the thoughts. But it's also the receptive language in terms of your child's ability to receive thoughts. I'm sorry that I talk through my hands, but that's kind of like what I do. So we talked about that. We also talked about, does your child have behaviors that impedes his or her learning and that of others? And that's really what we're going to dive deep down into tonight in terms of behaviors that impedes his or her learning and that of others. In terms of whether or not your child will need augmentative assistive technology, we'll kind of talk about that a little later, okay? Because that's a framework within itself. And in terms of transitional services, we'll also save that for a live within itself. So let's talk about behaviors. So, I'm going to kind of like flip flop in terms of the parent side as well as the school district side. So, sometimes parents, we are called because of the fact that our children display certain behaviors, right? For some parents, I'm not saying all, not being accusatory in any way. It's like, hey, school district, I'm doing the best that I can. And when you call my phone all day, it's a bit too much. Okay. So as a parent, that is what you're saying. But as a school district, the school district is saying, well, you're the parent. And Anitra Green was so, articulate, she articulated this really well. Who am I going to call? Because if I don't call the parent, and you're the person that is listed on the emergency contact, and if I don't call you, then you're going to say, well, why didn't you let me know? I don't want to overwhelm you, but at the same time, as the parent, I'm going to call you, right? I am. So as a parent, I'm frustrated. The school district is frustrated, but then we have a child in the middle, right, that needs different services. So last week we talked about behaviors. We talked about fast triggers, and that is those things that just hit the trigger, right? It just instantly makes you annoyed, even as an adult, right? It's that one thing that just gets under your skin. And when it's said, I'm just going to listen. It's just going to be some words. We going from 0 to 100 real quick. That's a fast trigger. With the slow trigger, it's I'm going to hold on to it. I'm going to hold on to it. I'm going to hold on to it. And then one day it can hit that fast trigger, right? But there is something called a functional behavior assessment. That is that question that does your child have behaviors that impedes his or her learning or that of others, right? Because once we check that off, now we actually have to do something about it. Some parents may not know, some teachers may not know exactly what are the fast triggers, right? What is that one thing that just is just when you say or if you do this, it's a 0 to 100 moment, right? So what the functional behavior assessment does is it explores that. What are those things that just hits a fast trigger for a student? Okay. And it may take a series of time because when you hit a fast trigger, is it some physical things that you see? Sometimes when people get annoyed as adults, think about those things that you do when you're annoyed right away. If you're at a meeting, you may push away from a table, right? You may, say, look, I just need to take 5 minutes. Like, this isn't the time. Or sometimes a person can be a fast trigger. When that particular person comes in a room, right, you're not thinking positive thoughts. So all of that stuff about leave your personal problems at the front door. Now, and I'm putting it in adult language because parents, I'm talking to you. You don't always leave it there. Let's just be honest and truthful. Certain people that come into a particular space annoys you. You have a certain attitude. You may doodle. You drawing different stuff in a meeting. You might be hiding your phone, doing stuff under a meeting because I'm not going to listen to this particular person because that person annoys me. And instead of acting a particular way, I'm just going to distance myself because there are particular strategies, right, that you learn to do that. But children don't always have those particular strategies. So when that particular child or that particular adult enters the room, it can cause that fast trigger. So we need to list what are the fast triggers. Okay? What are the fast triggers? And what are the antecedents? The antecedents is what happens before the fast trigger and what happens after the fast trigger. It's in there. What happens before the fast trigger and what happens after the fast trigger, right? Before the fast trigger, the person may ball up their fist. The student may ball up their fist. They may have some physical signs of the fast trigger. And when you see those particular signs, as parents, sometimes we'll see, well, something is not going right. So even as a parent during the functional behavior assessment, you may say, look out for this or look out for that. Because when my child is annoyed, they have a tendency to do this or to do that. That's an antecedent. Okay, in education, that is called the antecedent. Mom, please. Sorry, excuse me for interrupting. So it could be this or it could be that. Okay, so that is definitely the antecedent. And then an antecedent can even take place in a particular, classroom. Is the child more likely to act, to display certain behaviors in reading class or in math class or in science class, right? So an antecedent can take place in a particular class. If a student is more likely to act up every single day in a particular class, then that should be listed so that we can drill down, because that particular subject matter could be the subject matter that we need to explore more. If a student is acting up in reading, then guess what? That's an indication that reading may pose as an issue. If the student acts up in math, it may be math is the particular issue. And guess what? Even during transitional classes, like when there's a lot of movement in the hallway, if the student is, having some difficulty in the morning time on the school bus, it can be an array of different things. But what we are trying to do, or what the district is trying to do with the functional behavior assessment, is find out, when is it more likely to happen, right? What class is more likely to happen, and what happens before, and what happens after. Okay, so we're trying to narrow some things down, like what's causing the behavior. Is it a particular teacher that, when we look at the behavior rating scales, a lot of the behaviors is acting up, it is happening in this particular teacher's class, right? So, that is, fast trigger, slow triggers, and definitely antecedents. What's happening before, what's happening after, what classes is it most likely to happen in, because we are trying to gather some information. Or is it happening in transitional time? Is it happening on the bus? Is it happening during times where there is instructional time, not core curriculum subject areas? You know what lunchtime, hallway time, going to the bus, entering the building, because that within itself may say a lot. It may say that if a student is in a crowded hallway, they could be overstimulated, right? And in a IEP, under specially designed instruction, maybe the student may need to leave a couple minutes before his or her peers, right? So that they don't have all of that stimuli. Or maybe the student may have to wait after his or her peers, so it's not as much stimuli. So that's definitely key and important. However, with a functional behavior assessment, the only way that it can be done is if parents and a school district, if it's agreed upon, right, that it needs to happen. So we don't have to be embarrassed if our children are displaying difficulty one way or another. If you're getting 1,000 different phone calls, if you're getting notes on a report card that, Derek is inattentive in a particular classroom, that they are having conflict with their peers, guess what, parents? Let's address it. It's as simple as that. Let's address it. And if you see some of those behaviors at home, let's address it. Because if you're getting phone calls from teachers, that's an indication, or the guidance counselor or the social worker, that an issue is present, right? And we need to address that. And also, parents is a lot of parents are saying, listen, Nicole, I know it. I've been calling the school. I've been telling them that I'm doing the best that I can. You're calling. Now let's go a step further, right? If your child has an IEP and your child is involved in a lot of conflict, right? Then maybe we need to talk about some social skills intervention, right? Under the related service portion of the IEP. Okay? Because if my child is having issues with various students, then maybe we need to address some social skills. It's not this, oh, what do you mean, Nicole, that my child don't have social skills? My child does have social skills. Okay, maybe they do. and maybe it's some components that need to be readdressed. Or if your child has problems with resolving conflict. Sometimes as adults, we have problems with, resolving conflict. I know at one time in my life, I wasn't a good communicator, right? And as a result of it, conflict arose, right? So I had to step back and learn some skills. Thank God for Javon's Healing Center, right? This says, sis, give yourself some grace, right? And give others some grace. And we need to learn how to better resolve conflict. So holding it all in and internalizing, that didn't work. And being explosive, that didn't work. And I'm saying to myself, listen, everybody telling me what's not working. What is going to work, right? So I had to learn about something called a tool belt, right? And what works for me is getting up in the morning, right? Listening to a little bit of Sarah Jakes, and even, having conversation with one of my colleagues. I love when she enters the room. We pretend like I don't love that she enters the room, but this is what we do, right? And we create a good space, right? But that's what works for me. For some people, it might be mindfulness in the morning. For other people, it may be Zumba in the morning. For other people, it may be a good walk in the morning. It may be listening to some music in the morning, but it's finding those things that work for you. Well, guess what? That's the same thing that happens for our children, right? They need that good energy and what works for them. And every child is different. So I can't say what specifically works for your child, right? Uh, okay. So I can't say specifically what works for your child, right? But we have to create for an IEP, should the parent be present? Absolutely, Miss Celine. The parent should be present in an IEP meeting. So, even if a parent under the parental safeguards, right? Parents can even ask for IEP meetings. And after a parent asks for an IEP meeting, the school district has up until 10 days to schedule that IEP meeting, right? So even under the invitation, because all parents should receive invitations, right? And if that particular time does not work for you, you have a right to suggest other times, and you also have a right to request a copy of your child's entire educational file before the meeting. But yes, parents, you should be present for an IEP meeting. And, most districts, they want to accommodate your schedule. However, you have a right to be present because ultimately you want to meet with everybody that is present. And in all IEP meetings, it has to be a LEA, a local education agent. And that is the ultimate decision maker in your IEP meeting. Okay. You have to have a special education teacher present, and you also have to have a regular education teacher present. And in all IEP meetings, every school district has to afford you the opportunity and ask you the question, would you like a copy of your procedural safeguards? And the procedural safeguards is all your rights. But when you sign, after all of the demographic information, and parents, please make sure that your telephone number, your address, all of that demographic information is listed on the IEP. It should be the first sheet. Okay. So after that, and all of the list of people that are present that sign in, underneath it also says not only did you receive a copy of the procedural safeguards, but do you understand the procedural safeguards? If you don't understand, don't sign off that you do. Mm-mm, mm-mm. You have to, let's stop going through you get this at every single IEP meeting. You can probably paste them to the wall. I have heard it a million times. But when you sign off that you received it, you are also signing off that you understand it. If you don't understand it, you don't understand it. Ask the question. It is nothing wrong with going through the document and asking the necessary question. Or prior to an IEP meeting, maybe go through some old procedural safeguards and highlight some things that you may have some questions about. So now we're getting back to the functional behavior assessment. Okay. After the functional behavior assessment, after the fast triggers, after the slow triggers, after the antecedents, and also as a part of the functional behavior assessment, the psychologist is also observing your student, your child, in a classroom or in several classrooms, right? So you'll have the opportunity to review that. And then you'll have something called behavior rating scales, where the teachers, as well as you, will have the opportunity to rate exactly where your child is scoring. But even with the behavior rating scales, you want to know what type of behavior rating scales. Is BASC and is also Connor's behavior rating scales. As parents, we need to know the difference. What kind of functional behavior assessment are you doing? What are the specific behavior rating scales? And let me give you an example. And with some behavior rating scales, it's sometimes, it's never, it's often, it's always. However, my always, in terms of what I perceive as always, may be different from what you perceive as always. With my always, it could be 10 out of 12 times. With your always, it could be 6 out of 7 times. So we just want to be very clear when we're answering these questions. What is always? What is never? What is sometimes? What is your perception of that? Versus, with other behavior rating scales, it could be 5 out of 10 times, 6 out of 9 times. What as a parent best satisfies, what I mean, what you perceive or what you would like to see in terms of your child. With me, I want to see how many times. I don't want to go over with your sometimes and what you're always. No, I want to know concrete data so that we are on the same page. I don't want it to be ambiguous. I don't want to figure anything out. I want to know specifically, what are you saying about any child that I advocate for? Let me be very clear with that. So you have the observation, you have the behavior rating scales, you may even have different reports. You may have some antecedents, you may hear, different conversations, different assessments, different, paperwork, different after the review of paperwork, what other people had to say. So, with the functional behavior assessment is really drilling down, is really saying, what specifically does my child need? I mean, not need, but what exactly is being assessed? And then after you complete the assessment part, then now we're creating goals and objectives. But look at the functional behavior assessment as the X-ray, right? Even when we're X-raying, we have to X-ray the right part of the body. Because if we're not X-raying the right part of the body, then we're not going to cast the right part of the body. Okay? So with a functional behavior assessment, this isn't a do drop in. This isn't a let's just write this down to get this over with. This is actually knowing who my child is, right? And creating and going into a space and being honest. But we all have to we all have to be honest in terms of this process. Now, if you know that your child is doing certain things, if you don't want to be honest with anybody else, you need to be honest with yourself, okay? Because the only way that your child can get the related services that he or she needs, right? We have to be honest. Now, guess what? After the evaluation is completed, after the functional behavior assessment is completed, if you don't agree with certain parts of it, you have a right to speak up. Not only do you have a right to speak up, but you have to document what parts of it did you agree with, what parts of it didn't you agree with. Because if you didn't agree with certain parts, you have a right to a independent evaluation, right? You can write to the district and say, I don't agree with this. These are the reasons why I don't agree with this, and I want an independent evaluation, right? And then is a negotiation about who's going to be the independent evaluator. But even after getting a independent evaluation, the procedural safeguards say that the district has to consider the evaluation. They do not have to agree with all of the evaluation, right? So then it has to be a negotiation with what parts do you agree with, what parts do you disagree with, right? If the district disagrees with the independent evaluation in its entirety, the district has a right to do just that. But then you, as a parent, have a right to mediation, where you can go, you and the district have a right to sit down in front of somebody that is assisting with mediating the situation, and or you can ask for a pre-hearing conference, and we'll talk about that, in detail during another live. As a matter of fact, we can do that next week, right? So you have a right to a pre-hearing conference to say these are all of the things that I don't agree with, and this is what I think that the district can do to remedy that. Okay, and then the district can go back and forth again. With a pre-hearing conference, is still negotiation. Or you can ask for something called a due process hearing. And a due process hearing, both the district as well as you as the parent have a right to arbitrate before a hearing officer. However, then the burden of proof is on the parent to say, these are all of the reasons why. And with due process, again, we can have live just about a due process hearing. As a matter of fact, we can even put together a mock due process hearing so that you can see exactly what is done. So, I've had the opportunity to, I don't know if anybody has any questions in terms of the whole functional behavior assessment, the whole behavioral management planning. But the only thing that I am saying to all parents, right? If you know that your child is having any level of this difficulty, let's talk about it. Let's bring it to the table. If you don't necessarily feel comfortable in terms of talking even to the district about it, but with the IEP, hopefully it can be inclusive. But if you don't feel comfortable, please seek out some type of, outside services. Um, I'm going to say it on April 15th. State Representative Carol Kazim is having a mental health fair. There will be plenty of mental health service providers that do not have a waiting list that is going to be present. I will be present. I'm willing to hold any parent's hands as well as other people on the team. Not that I want to speak for CMP Radio because I can't, but P has allowed this platform to take place because he believes in the community and he believes in, all parents and students receiving services. So please, April 15th at the STEM school at 9 o'clock in the morning, breakfast is going to start. Please engage us. Let's talk about how a morning can start. Let's talk about getting students and families the services that they most desperately need. I am going to now wrap this up. My name is Nicole Cogdell, and I have been a parent advocate for the last 30 years. I advocate not only for children, but also with seniors with the waiver program. Okay, and there are waiver programs also for students as well. Depending on the age, will dictate exactly what waiver they could possibly fall into. But please, should you have any questions, even after this live, I do go back in the lives and look at different questions. Also, please, if you would like to get in contact with me, you can inbox me. But I just want to thank both P and Leslie for allowing me to have this particular platform, and I just look forward to continuing to pour into residents' lives, children's lives, parents' lives. But please, we are the missing pieces. We are a community. We see that our children are in need of different services, and they won't get it unless we advocate for it. Please, parents, pick up your procedural safeguards. Let's break down procedural safeguards. Please share this live. And P and Leslie, thank you again so very much. Parents, if you have any questions, you can inbox me, but look forward to me going live again. Thank you so very much. Parents, if your child has any behavioral needs, any services, conflict resolution, social skills intervention, if they're hypersensitive to sound, whatever the reason that causes the behavior, please let's deal with it, because the school is not going to call anybody else other than you. Please have a good day. A good night. Thank you so very much. Please share the live and tune into CMP Radio if you are running for school board. And if you want to come and be interviewed on CMP Radio, definitely consider the Missing Pieces and Nicole Cogdell. You can contact P and CMP Radio, info@cmpradio.net, if you are a school board candidate and you would like to be interviewed. Have a good day.
CMPradio.net is the station. Listen, man, let's cultivate together. Bring us all your show ideas. Content creators, we're looking for that. Videographers, we're looking for that. You can be a part of the next great big thing that takes place right here in Chester, Pennsylvania.